Hey, Jeff Nelson of VegSource, thanks for tuning in. Today we have back Dr. Peter Rogers, and the topic is, can you trust the science? You already may know who Dr. Rogers is. He's a genius. He was educated at Stanford and Harvard. He got 99% board scores. He was the first in his class in med school of over 300 or 331 students, something like that. But I can't think of a smarter person out there when it comes to understanding the body, health, disease, longevity, everything of greatest importance when it comes to protecting your health. Now, here's a quote I want to read. Dr. Rogers has the most comprehensive and accurate understanding of pathophysiology in the world, unquote. That's from a doctor, a guy named Gregory Sloop, MD, who himself happens to be the top atherosclerosis expert in the world. And pathophysiology, by the way, it's the study of the fundamental changes that occur in your body as a result of a disease or a medical condition. It combines aspects of pathology, which is the study of disease, and physiology, which is the study of normal bodily functions, in order to understand how diseases or injuries disrupt normal bodily process. So it's always a pleasure to have Dr. Rogers come on my channel and share his amazing knowledge. You may have seen his books here. I've got several of them. They're amazing, definitive. Can't recommend them enough. So, can we trust the science, as the saying goes? Well, here's one answer that I'm going to play. This is from John McDougall in 2003, talking on this very subject. If you saw my recent tribute to Dr. McDougall, then you saw part of this clip already. Here's the full thing.
And money will buy almost anything. Scientists are clever. They'll figure the proper design to show the results. And that's the unfortunate thing. It used to not be that way. Used to not be that heavy influence of industry on our research, but now I can't trust anything. I honestly can't. I have to look at the supporter, I have to look at the data, and then I have to ask myself, is it true? Because I know what the truth is. And I've been around a long time. I know what the truth is. People are supposed to look, feel, and function well for 80 to 90 years of good life. And we're not supposed to do that with drugs. And there should be a good diet, and I believe that diet is a plant-based diet. If the research contradicts that, I have to figure out why. There is a reason. They've done something to get around that basic truth.
Okay, so I want to get right into this with Dr. Rogers. Welcome, Peter. It is great to have you as always.
Thanks. Hi.
Yeah. So are you ready to give your answer to this?
Yeah.
Why don't we go? Let's get the show on the road.
Self-portrait with bandaged ear, Vincent van Gogh. And Van Gogh injured himself because he was crazy. But most people nowadays, they all just injure themselves because they're ignorant. They don't know what to eat, so they eat the wrong stuff and they get sick, and they think it's just because of aging. And there's what I would call the modern medicine futility cycle. They eat a lousy diet. They go to a doctor who doesn't know anything about nutrition or, toxicology. Basically, the three most important things in health are, I call it, the mnemonic is like NETs: nutrition, N for nutrition, E for epidemiology, T for toxicology. You can throw the S's in there if you want: stress and sleep and sunshine and stuff. But basically, the doctors don't know the stuff that affects health. Pre-med education and med school are basically a joke. In pre-med, you do calculus and physics. That's completely irrelevant, okay? I'm a triple-boarded, Harvard-trained doctor, imaging-guided surgeon, the highest possible tech, okay? And I don't ever use any math I didn't know by fourth grade. All of that mathematics, it's all a distraction. It's irrelevant to healthcare. So anyways, the doctor doesn't know anything about what actually causes disease, and they just treat everything with a pill. Match the elder to the pill and send a bill. That's how you make money, by selling drugs, by being a dealer instead of a healer, okay? And, you can't fix a dietary disease with a pill. All of medical school is essentially based on training the doctors to become internal medicine doctors. They learn other fields later, like, surgery, radiology, looking at slides under a microscope, if they're going to learn it at all. And what I'm trying to say is, this is Alice in Wonderland talking to the caterpillar, and he's blowing smoke at her. And that's what medical education is. It's fake. It's entirely a joke. And that's why, I can talk to a fourth-year medical student. Sometimes they tag along with me for a couple hours, and I can teach them more in 1 or 2 hours. I always say that to them before I talk to them. I will bet you I can teach you more about what causes disease and how to cure it in 1 or 2 hours than you've learned in the last 8 years. And sometimes a resident will tag them. They always laugh at first, and by the time they're done, they're like, I want a refund from my medical school. It's obvious, okay? Anyways, and here's how the doctors also are kind of prevented from ever getting educated about what actually causes diseases. all hospitals in the Western world have a bean counter, and the bean counter tracks productivity, and they want productivity, and they claim that that's high quality care. Follow the standard of care. What they really want is a doctor to generate as many billing codes as possible so they can make more money. And I joke, it's like the Red Queen and, Alice in Wonder Through the Looking Glass. She's like, you have to run to stay in the same place. So all doctors are under great pressure to go as fast as possible and to only do things that provide billable services. And you don't get paid for educating patients about nutrition and health and whatnot. So that's why it happens. And then CME is kind of a joke, continuing medical education. Your wife is on your case. You don't spend enough time with her. You take her for granted. Okay, so you go to some beach place or something in a warm climate. You sign the attendance, and then you go with her to the beach for the rest of the day. All right, you don't get any education out of it. And even if you attended the lectures, they're sponsored by a drug company. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you is the foundation of modern medicine, for the most part, the vast majority of it is all fake. It's a stack of cards. It's a joke. All right. And now I'm also going to talk about something here too. Big money kind of runs the world. There's big money that runs the world. And in the past, big money simply wanted to rip off the pros, okay? It looked at them as like a bunch of dumb cattle and how could it rip them off? But nowadays, I think big money looks at the world and it says it's overpopulated, all right? And it says all these overpopulated, people, they're polluting the world, they're polluting the rivers, polluting the skies, etc. We need to decrease the numbers, because if the numbers are decreased, and the goal has already been set, it's 500 million, then there'll be less pollution. So they actually think they're doing something nice, but what it means is they want to reduce the numbers by 95%. Okay, that's a lot. That means there's not going to be a lot of musical chairs left to sit in, okay? And people describe the current events as being a fork in the road between these two paths. There's basically either going to be a great, awakening and revival of traditional values, or there's going to be a continuation on down this road. We're really right about here somewhere, and are we going to get back to this road? I don't know what's going to happen. Sadly, we're much more strongly headed in this direction. And then one of the things they call this movement here is a way to kind of get rid of all these traditions, because what they want is no religion. Because with atheism, it's much easier to control the population because it means there's no rules. And they call these open, borders they call it the broom. They call this a replenishment and a broom to sort of sweep away the tradition, sweep away the past, sweep away any claims to free, speech. And it's a way to usher in total control of a population, in a sense, to own them like farm animals and get them to do whatever they are told and simply what is needed, and not to have any more of them than is needed to manage, the farm or whatever. Okay, and there is a large component of it. Either if you got religion, then you have respect for mankind, created in the image of God. If you don't have any religion, basically, then might is right. Atheistic Darwinism is a default setting in the Western world to a non-Christian philosophy, and it basically says whoever, survival of the fittest, whoever's got the money and the power shall do whatever they want, okay? And science has become a joke. And the reason I went through all that stuff is you have to understand that to make sense out of what's going on with science. Basically, scientists are poor people who have a high level of curiosity and want to study things in a scientific way. And they don't have any money. So they have to pay their loans for getting a PhD, for example. So big money basically tells the scientist, you promote our product and we'll give you money. If you don't promote our product, we'll give you nothing. If you criticize our product, we'll get you fired from your university. And they do that all the time. And the population has become very gullible. The Western population looks at science as a replacement for God, and they think that science represents objective truth. So it comes in like as a Trojan horse. They go, this is science. And then whatever they want, they just claim it's science. And they use that to control the population. And the population's so stupid. And they play other types of games with words. There's a lot of games played with words. Basically, you accept whatever we say or we will call you names, okay? And I kind of joke that you're not allowed to criticize anything big money says or else you get called a name, okay? And if you get called a name, then you're embarrassed, you're socially shunned and all this other stuff. And it has gotten really bad. I mean, take a look at what's happening in England as we speak the last couple of days. All right, now here's Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and he is a guy who wrote the great book, Gulag Archipelago, coming out of Russia. He's a brilliant guy, and he had noticed, he had been on a successful tank squadron. He was like commander, captain, and he thought he'd be welcomed back as a hero. But instead, they said, oh, you've been corrupted by the West. And he kind of was in and out of trouble in Russia. And he came to the conclusion after studying in great detail, atheism is what makes it possible. Atheism was at the core of the entire Soviet system. And it led to the death of 65 million Christians, burning down of 48,000 churches. And he says, if I was asked to formulate as concisely as possible what was the main cause for the ruinous revolution that swallowed up some 65 million of our people, I could not put it more accurately than to repeat, men had forgotten God, and that is why this has all happened. Modern society is hypnotized by socialism. It is prevented by socialism from seeing the mortal danger it is in. And one of the greatest dangers of all is that you have lost all sense of danger. You cannot even see what is coming towards you as it moves swiftly towards you, like an invisible car coming towards you. To destroy a people, you must first sever its roots. That's why all this traditional education, studying the ancient Greeks and Romans and the Bibles and all that stuff has been moved out of the public schools. Solzhenitsyn continues, to do evil, a man must first of all believe that he is doing good. He must have an ideology. That is what gives evil doing its long sought after justification. And this gives the evildoer this necessary steadfastness and determination. It's kind of like the Hannah Arendt claim. She said most evil is banal. It's done by regular so-called normal people, and that's the most frightening thing. They just have they're gullible, they're just trained by a new slogan, and they go for it. And so I'm saying this because this is what's happened to science. Here's T.S. Eliot, the English writer. He says, if you will not have God, and he is a jealous God, then you must pay your respects to Mr. Stalin. And that's what it is, and that's what's happening. And just to give you a sense of how Stalin would talk, Stalin, one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. The Communist Party cannot be neutral towards religion. The Communist Party stands for science, and all religion is opposed to science. So what I'm basically making the point here is when you've got big money power and atheistic Darwinism as the metaphysical philosophic system, the replacement for religion, the party in power will simply say whatever they say, that's science, and then you have to expect it. You have to respect it as God's word. Okay, here's Nikita Khrushchev. We have no use for the policy of the Gospels. If someone slaps you, just turn the other cheek. No. We have shown anyone who slapped us on our cheek would get his head kicked off. Okay, and it sounds brutal because it is brutal. Okay, what did Jesus Christus say? Love thy neighbor, forgive. Go and sin no more. Which one among you is without sin? Then do not stone this woman, the lady who committed adultery. Come on. That was a society you could work with. And of course, it harkens back to for Plato's, allegory of the cave. Basically, the typical proles that are clueless or just watch the shadows on the wall of those who tell the stories, and they don't know what's going on rather than going up into the sun and having absolute truth. This is manufactured truth, the fake stories versus seeing reality. Okay. And the ancient Greeks had this sense of progress. They traded with a lot of other communities. They learned as much as they could. This is the Acropolis. This is Pericles' funeral oration. And they had this idea of constant improvement and betterment and freedom. Yeah, they had an aristocracy. Culture, often typically will come from an aristocracy component of the culture. Okay, here's Ayn Rand, the smartest woman who ever lived. Listen to what she said. The smallest minority is the individual. If you guarantee the rights of an individual, you guarantee the rights of everyone. Okay, and that's kind of like Christianity. Basically, we're created in the image of God, therefore part divine as well as part beast, and we should thus respect the individual. And what did Jesus Christus said? He says, that which you do to the least of my brethren, you have done unto me. Okay, she says, Victor Hugo is the greatest novelist who ever lived. Upon reading him, one feels as if they are entering a cathedral. Quo Vadis by Henry Sienkiewicz is the greatest novel ever written. That's about the contrast between the ancient Romans and the early Christians, and the idea that the Christians brought love and forgiveness into the world on a big scale rather than the traditional tit-for-tat, Hatfields and the McCoys feuds that never end. Okay, Fyodor Dostoevsky is the second greatest novelist who ever lived. The three best artistic times in the history of man were the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, the Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance, and the 1800s. Although only a century away, the 1800s were aesthetic light years away from So she basically is trying to say the 100 years between the 800s and the 1900s are like aesthetic light years. And it's rather incredible. If you study the artistic achievements, both in painting and in literature of the 1800s, they're mind-boggling how incredible they are compared to the 1900s. And now here's one of my favorite quotes of Ayn Rand. Art is a concretization of metaphysics. And some people say, oh, she was a bitch, she was not nice, whatever. No, she was talking about leave everybody alone, let them live their life, let them be free. She was an absolute genius. Go read her quotes. And what I'm trying to say is, when you have the traditional point of view, you create sculptures like this. Michelangelo's Pietà, how magnificent, Jesus Christus in the lap of his mother. And also his own mother had died when he was only about 7 years old. So, he longed for her and he missed her. And this is the most beautiful statue of all time. Here's the modern art statue in the museum in Rotterdam. Statues of feces. What I'm trying to say is if your metaphysics are wrong, your art will be wrong. Because as Ayn Rand had said, art is a concretization of metaphysics. It's a solid, concrete manifestation of what you actually believe. So if you don't believe in anything, a turd is where your values are at. Look at modern architecture. This is a quote by Tom Wolfe. He says, typical modern architecture, the building looks like an animal cage, and in front of it, there's always a statue of a turd. And that is completely true. Anybody that's been around modern buildings. Okay, look what those that believed in God would produce. Here's the Amiens Cathedral in France. It's magnificent. It's spectacular. The best buildings ever made. Why is it that we came to our peak in architecture, over 500 years ago? It's ridiculous. Okay, and then another thing, people try to tell you, oh, Picasso's a good artist. Picasso stinks. Okay, and Picasso was a collectivist big time. Okay, here's a typical better than average Picasso painting. It's a piece of junk. It looked like something, a beginning art student did in high school. All right. Now here's real art. This is by Edmund Layton called Godspeed. It's magnificent. It's beautiful. And for every magnificent painting like this, I could show you a whole bunch of other ones. Oh, by the way, I wrote the best book ever written in the history of art in terms of survey books. There's individual artist books that are magnificent, but all the survey books, they stink. That's why I wrote it, because all the college professors, they first of all, show you a bunch of cave paintings, then a bunch of broken statues, and then they show you some good stuff in the middle, then they show you a bunch of modern art and they pretend it's real. Okay, it's mostly a waste of time, and they talk 3 times as much as they show pictures. All I did was show the greatest pictures ever made. And like almost no one looks at it. I make videos about it. I'll get 25 views on my YouTube channel. This is the greatest art of all time. Religion means legare, from legare to ligate, to tie together, like a surgeon's ligatures, to tie society together. Because society has lost religion, it has lost its community, and everybody just goes their own way. And when you have a country like that, what that means is more and more oppression has to be pushed in to get everybody to behave. It's not good. It's much better that people intrinsically behave because they want to. That to be the default setting. I summarize all the great heroes of culture and thinkers and scholars. No one even pays any attention to it. I know I have no ability to market or anything, but I'm just letting you know, you don't value your culture. And as far as I can tell, these are the best quote book, the best art books ever written. Your culture disappears, and that's what's happening now, okay? And we're paying the price for it, and our freedom is slipping away. Our free speech is slipping away. It's all collapsing downward because no one has the energy or the knowledge to maintain it. Most people have become functional illiterate. They don't pay attention to what's going on. So what I'm saying is, where would you want your education to come from? You can have it from smart people like the McDougalls. They'll tell you the truth. They'll do the best you can. They'll give you the references. You can double check everything they say. Or do you want it forced upon you by a bureaucracy? You've got all these, like, for example, big name institutions like these Ivy League institutions. But the reality is they're a joke, okay? The head of internal medicine, every one of these departments, I will tell you, is a joke compared to Dr. McDougall. I know these places. I did some of my training at Harvard, okay? And I'm just telling you, if anybody in the audience, if they spent 1 month watching nutrition videos on the internet, they would know how be better able to cure chronic disease than the head of the internal medicine departments in any of these hospitals, because these guys can't do nutritional medicine from a big university because they don't get paid for it. They would lose their money. They wouldn't get their grants. In order to get promoted, they got to get grant money. Where do you think grant money comes from? It comes from big money, big pharma, all right? So they got to promote drugs. They got to sell drugs, or they can't get promoted. They can't get any grant money. They can't maintain their departments. So the whole system is based on selling drugs. It's a big joke, okay? You don't need to be rich. McDougall just sits there and talks. The poor guy was lost his house, lost his library. And it's not rocket science, most of what you need to know. And that's partly why conventional medicine wants no part of this. Okay, this is McDougall giving a talk about one of the greatest priorities. It's from this lecture right here, clearing up the confusion about sugar. Biggest toxin in the Western diet is fat. Next after that is protein, especially animal protein. And he thinks salt and sugar, really this should be like a couple of these arrows, are totally scapegoated. So we're not going to go into all that now. But what I'm trying to say is you don't need $1 billion, okay, to figure out the cure to heart disease. It's already been figured out. And then what you'll also hear, too, from the paleo, keto, carnivore groups, oh, epidemiology is nonsense, it's of no value. That's completely untrue. Here's Papua New Guinea, where they ate 93% of their calories from sweet potatoes. You got these skinny, fit, strong guys, all right? Sweet potatoes are very low in protein, only 4.5% of the calories from protein, so a very low protein diet. And it's, almost entirely carbohydrates, okay? There's only 1% of calories from fat, okay? All right, here is Bruce Lee, and that's Bolo. Now, Bolo, I'm going to guess, was taking steroids. All the other guys, all the extras in a Bruce Lee movie, everybody's skinny, except for Bolo, who I think is taking roids and maybe eating meat or raw. I don't know for sure his diet, but that'd be my expectation. Okay, here's a picture of Japanese men in the 1960s. They're all skinny like that, also eating a rice-based diet. And here's the Kenyans. They win most of the long-distance races nowadays. Kipchoge set the world record in the marathon at 2 hours, just a second under 2 hours. Okay, what does he eat? Corn, squash, okay, stuff like that. Carbohydrate-based diet. And he's at a Tarahumara of northern Mexico, the Copper Canyon area, Sierra Madre Mountains. Okay, it's like every guy in town can run over 100 miles in 2 days. It's not like just the fast guy. And what do they eat? They eat corn and squash, some beans, local greens. It's obvious. McDougall had said this as well. Every single large, healthy population, they all eat a starch-based diet. There's no exceptions. Because some people will also ask me, what about being a fruitarian? And I know some individuals have been pretty successful with that, even some ultramarathoner guys. But there's no society that's been ever able to sustain itself as a fruitarian society. There just isn't. Don't get me wrong. I think fruits are actually a decent food, okay? But we don't got time to get in that right now. Okay, I made the point before, like Super Mario Brothers, your own life, you're like the character in a video game. If you do the good things, you get the energy points. If you make a mistake, you lose energy points. So what you want to do is learn what's good for you, learn what's bad for you, do the good stuff, avoid the bad stuff. I mean, that's what it basically comes down to. Okay, and then all this stuff what I see happening to people is most people that are sick, they don't know whatever happened to them. They're just like, well, my sister is sick, my brother's sick, it must be, genetic, okay? No. It's because you all eat the same stuff, you got the same bad habits, all right? And you keep piling up all these health problems on yourself. It's not that common. You want to be healthy, you want to be like Adam and Eve, but, keep your indoor heating and plumbing. Genesis 1:29, behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed and fruit upon the face of the earth, and it shall be food for you, okay? This is an example of the Spartan vegan diet, which I designed. It's basically pretty much the same thing as a McDougall diet. I maybe have people eat a little more fruit. McDougall would say eat up to 90% of your calories from starch and 5% from fruits, 5% from veggies. And I think that's fine, especially he's dealing with a lot of people that are pretty sick. If you got a person who's, more active and they exercise a lot, they can eat a higher percent of fruits. I've eaten about 35% of calories from fruits for many years, but fruits can be problematic. They're more expensive. They don't store as well, etc. But anyways, and then get your social stuff correct, get along with your family and friends as best you can, exercise, sunshine, sleep, have a religion, have a sense of purpose. Religious people are a lot healthier. Having a sense of purpose makes you resilient. Probably the only thing you're going to need to take is vitamin B12. I like methylcobalamin. I would never take cyanocobalamin because that can accumulate. I just drink water. I don't even drink that much water because there's so much hydration within the plants themselves. Okay, now getting back to the science. And I kind of went through all that because what I'm sort of saying here is I don't think you can have good science if you don't have a religious society. The reason is there's just too much profit that comes from ripping off the pros. Okay, so this is how scientists really are. They basically, are like lapdogs. They have to do exactly what they're told or they don't get paid and they get fired from their job. So they're kind of a big joke. And what happens is actually there's very harsh consequences for this. This is the whole treatment of attention deficit, okay? Attention deficit disorder here. They're drugging these children with amphetamines. If you were on the street corner and you tried to sell amphetamines to children, that would be against the law. But doctors are prescribing amphetamines for children. It causes brain damage. It basically causes a gradual, slow lobotomy. They're excitotoxins, stimulants, okay? And then here's also listening to Prozac. And what a bunch of nonsense that was. Prozac is now advertised, and it's been written up in the research study. It is so toxic to humans that some researchers are recommending it be used for chemotherapy. Okay, it's crazy. Fluoxetine, it's got fluoride in it. Fluoride's major neurotoxin, come on. And then psychology has become a big joke too. They're basically the equivalent of a priest for atheistic Darwinism. And so I like what this lady's quote is here. Are you ready for me to diagnose your totally normal reaction to our messed up society as mental illness so I can get you addicted to mind-altering drugs for the rest of your life? Basically, almost all psych drugs, they cause a gradual, slow lobotomy. They damage brain cells. They're really bad. I've given a bunch of lectures on that. I can tell you all the references on that. They're a disaster, okay? It's one of the most harmful fields in all of medicine. And Dr. McDougall interviewed Peter Gochke, from the Cochrane collaboration, who said psychiatry is the worst field in medicine, and they'd be better off if they didn't exist, these psychiatric drugs. They cause so much problems. Okay, and then here's a couple thoughts on psychology. How can a psychologist help you with relationships when they don't know the difference between a man and a woman? It's not a joke. Psychology can't tell you the difference between right and wrong. What is good art? What is a good book? Who is a good role model? Christianity can easily answer all these questions. Jesus Christ, the Holy Family, and the saints are all good role models. Okay, good art includes Michelangelo, Raphael, Caravaggio, Botticelli, Roger van der Weyden, John Everett Lay, Edmund Layton, etc. Good books include the Bible, Christmas Carol, Brothers Karamazov, all the famous books, Les Mis, Quo Vadis, Pinocchio, etc. So what I'm saying is the psychology of Christianity is better than the psychology of psychology. It sort of gets to the point. And then you say, oh, well, Harvard is a magnificent institution. I'm telling you, these places are a joke. Did you ever notice that your best nutrition health experts, they come typically from Podunk? Okay, where's McDougall from? Some small little place in Michigan, and then from out in Hawaii. He became the best because he wanted to be the best, and he made the effort, and he tells you the truth. Okay, look at this diet. This is from Walter Willett, the head of Harvard's, School of Public Health. Oh, gee, what credentials? And it's absolute nonsense. Right at the base of his pyramid, he puts healthy fats and healthy oils, like olive oil and canola oil. That's insane. Okay, those are terrible for your arteries. And then right at the next level, fish, shellfish, and chicken. It's totally stupid. Peanut butter, cheese, tofu, nuts and seeds, all this high-fat stuff. And then dairy is next. I mean, it's completely idiotic. He says alcohol is okay, take a multivitamin. This is completely stupid. If I was teaching a med school class of nutrition, I would flunk the student for writing this, okay? It's idiotic, okay? And I also talk about levels of truth. There's old, safe, what I call grandma truth. Grandma tells you eat your veggies, fine, get your sleep. She's right, but it's pretty basic. Nobody's going to challenge that. There's then what I would call pre-med, med school level of truth. Most of what they talk about in med school and pre-med is irrelevant, but then there is stuff. And this would be more like, I'd call McDougall's the king of this level. What is the best treatment? What is the cause of these conventional diseases? The next level is more what I'll call shadow band truth. We're now at level 3. And this is what happens when you criticize stuff. If you criticize something like coffee or soy or F- in the water, all this type of stuff, automatically, because I've made a lot of videos. I got a lot of experience with it. I know what happens. That video will get less views. It'll somehow be partially shadow banned, okay? And then there's other things you can't even say at all on the regular channels. You got to go to the less well-known channels. You can't even say it. And what I'm also getting back to, why do I say I think you need religion or science is always going to be a joke? Because one of the 10 commandments is you must tell the truth, okay? And then the Bible teaches you all kinds of good stuff, even though, yeah, it's way too long. Okay, I'm not going to get into that. The Declaration and the Constitution, say, we are entitled to free speech. It's protected in the Constitution. And a lot of stuff like, how basic is this? For example, our doctors are a bunch of idiots. How come they don't know the most kindergarten level stuff? This is from a Dr. McDougall talk, okay, where he's talking about when the patients are fed a high-fat meal, they had a reduction in their pressure, arterial pressure of oxygen by 20%. Okay, now if you're at rest, the hemoglobin oxygen dissociation curve is relatively, it's sigmoidal shaped like an S, and it's relatively horizontal at the top. So you're not going to notice a change in PO2 if you're in totally good health and you're way up here on the curve. But we got a lot of patients. They're sitting right here. They're barely getting by. They're huffing and puffing just to walk down a hallway, okay? So they would greatly benefit from that extra 20% of PO2 in terms of increasing their oxygen saturation of their hemoglobin. So what I'm saying is, millions of people are screwed because their ignoramus doctors don't know this about how bad high-fat diets are. This is basic, okay? I just mentioned this now in less than 2 minutes of talking. You know that. I can guarantee you doctors don't know this. Pulmonologists don't know this. ICU specialists don't know this. Critical care intensivists don't know this. Trauma surgeons, they don't know this. They can easily improve the patient's oxygenation, have a better chance of getting them off the ventilator if they know this. It's basic, okay? They don't know it. And a whole bunch of papers have been written on this. Peter Quo, Meyer Friedman, Ray Rosenman, Roy Swank, Douglas Kelp. Okay, it's basic, and they don't know it, okay? So there's a high price to be paid for being ignorant about these things, and conventional medicine is ignorant. Okay, the rule of subsidized foods. So I look kind of close at all these subsidized foods, and almost all of them, they're full of toxins. Look at tap water. They got aluminum in there, which is a major slow poison. It's toxic to your gonads. It'll increase your chance of infertility. It's toxic to your brain. It makes you stupid. F- likewise. It's toxic to the reproductive system. It's toxic to the brain. It lowers IQs. It's toxic to the collagen. It weakens the spine, etc. Skeletal fluorosis. It looks very similar to DISH, diffuse idiopathic skeletal hyperostosis, okay, and degenerative disc disease, advanced. Okay, GMO corn, what's it full of? It's sprayed with atrazine. That's a very powerful estrogenic chemical. We're going to come back to atrazine in a moment, so this is important to remember for this talk. It's also a mitochondrial inhibitor. It's a major poison, okay? High fructose corn syrup is pretty routinely contaminated with Hg, mercury, because they'll push it through a chloralkali vat. And the companies would brag about high fructose corn syrup being a preservative, but they wouldn't say it was because of the mercury. GMO soy sprayed with glyphosate. You can think of that as being glycine phosphate. You're sticking a big phosphate on the glycine, which is a problem because this glycine, it is thought that it'll interpolate itself into collagen. Collagen's a triple helix, like my three fingers wrapped around, three fibrous proteins wrapped around each other to create a triple helix. And every third amino acid residue is a glycine. So if you substitute glycine phosphate in there, the big bulky phosphate prevents that from forming its nice normal triple helix. And it weakens the ligaments of the spine. And it is thought that that is contributing to spinal degenerative disc disease, the most common cause of back pain. And what I see all day long, every day. Okay, other stuff, soy. Soy is the most overhyped food. And in my opinion, based on studying, I think it's just being used to sterilize people. That's why it's subsidized. And it's full of tons of problems. You can't imagine. You've seen it. So how many people on the internet saying soy is a good food? Gee, other than the fact that it activates both estrogen receptors, ER alpha and ER beta, not just one of them. If you don't believe that, take a look at the Stephan Mueller paper in 2004 in Toxicological Science. It lowers sperm counts. There comes the expression soy boy. It lowers testosterone levels. It can damage the female reproductive tract, causes premature thalarc, menstruation. Breast development, it can disrupt female menstrual cycle. It's associated with increased fibroid tumors in women, can increase the risk of endometriosis, postmenopausal endometrial bleeding, contains heme iron, elevates insulin-like growth factor. Whether or not it's carcinogenic, that's not clear. There's tons of industry articles funded saying that it isn't, but there's others that say it is, and I don't know for certain on that one. It's goitrogenic, inhibits thyroid peroxidase. I just tell you this because this is an example of something where all the fake science tells you soy is the most wonderful thing in the world. But if you read the actual papers before industry took over, there's tons of problems with it. There's a tendency in it to concentrate fluoride and aluminum, which are both neurotoxins. Great. Soy-containing beverages. Okay. Nowadays, more and more avocados and apples are sprayed with this stuff here, AP, EEL. It's a toxin, okay? And here's, I read the chem data sheets on it, so don't try to tell me it's not a toxin. Okay, not only does it have trans fats, whoop-de-doo, it has a bunch of other toxic chemicals, and probably the most important one would be this stuff, acetonitrile, methylcyanide, okay? Cyanide, okay? How does that sound for you? All right, supposedly it's, primarily a fungicide to keep produce from spoiling so it doesn't get shipped back to the seller, the original seller. But, you got to be careful too. Anything that's a fungal inhibitor, if you look it up, quite often those are also mitochondrial inhibitors. Mitochondria, you need your mitochondria to make your brain work well, to make your muscles work well. It doesn't sound like a good idea to me. All right, and these things are kind of ubiquitous. Like I get the old-fashioned shirts with cotton. Okay, nowadays all these you try to buy a shirt, the vast majority of them are going to say wrinkle-free, wrinkle-free. It's because they put formaldehyde in there. Okay, that's embalming fluid. Okay, you don't want that crap on yourself. Okay, formaldehyde, please, and it's carcinogenic. Or they got polyester, another estrogen, polyethylene terephthalate, full of phthalates, lower sperm counts. Great. You want to buy underwear with polyester in there? Be rubbing estrogens on your crotch. Okay, the skin is designed to keep water out. That's why you can swim, jump in a pool, jump in a lake, and you don't immediately become waterlogged. but it's not designed to keep lipid out. It's primarily made out of lipid, okay? So it absorbs lipid, like dissolves like in chemistry. So you absorb these estrogenic chemicals. Flame retardants, are typically estrogenic. Okay, they can be bromine related, for example. Okay, I've talked about laundry detergent, these other things. So what I'm trying to say is people are being overwhelmed with estrogenic chemicals and with reproductive toxins that I just alluded to in the previous slide there. And that's why I think there's an incidence of infertility that's off the charts. It's so much higher than people know. I know people in the infertility business. They're busy. Okay. Tons of people got PCO, polycystic ovary and stuff because they're fat. All right, now here's just want to show you. These are the big books. Like when I was in med school, I was in awe of these books. The pathology textbook out of Harvard, I thought that was like the medical Bible equivalent to me when I was a young little second-year medical student. And the pathophysiology of heart disease coming from Harvard, oh, wow. Let me tell you something. These books are a joke. They stink. I look at them now as comic books. They're so full of lies. You read a chapter on autoimmune disease, there's nothing about leaky gut. That's the most important thing. There's no mention of Dr. Swank. There's no with multiple sclerosis. There's no mention of Dr. McDougall. McDougall's got hundreds of patients he cured of autoimmune disease by preventing leaky gut. That never gets into the books, okay? I have a recent edition. It's not in the book. Hypertension. No mention of the pioneers in hypertension care. The story of Kempner, the story to Richard Moore. Richard Moore spent his life, working on ion pumps. And basically, Kempner showed you reduce dietary fat, you get a dramatic improvement. Richard Moore showed how reducing sodium, you get a dramatic improvement. Kempner also did. And Kempner made the point, you really have to go down to a low threshold. Because McDougall's made the point, you don't get much of a benefit in hypertension if you just reduce from, let's say, 5,000 to 3,000 or even 2,000. But if you take it down to around 500 milligrams per day of sodium, then you do get a big benefit. So that's what Kempner meant by a threshold effect. Atherosclerosis, no mention of any of the pioneers, no mention of any of these guys. Kempner, Ornish, Esselstyn, Sloop, Roberts, none of these guys are even mentioned in the book. No mention of atherothrombosis here, or hemorrhagiology. That's the foundation of atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis is a blood clot. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is that the truth is kept hidden from all the young doctors in training, from all the trainees in residency and fellowship. I graduated first in my class, 99% on boards. Anything that was in the book, I would know it. Okay, it's not in the book. And I have more recent editions that go back to me. It's not in the book. I talk to doctors every day and I'll ask them questions. So what is atherosclerosis? What's a zeta potential? Okay, they don't know. None of them know. I've never had a single doctor answer those questions correctly. The only time any doctor ever answers a question correctly is I had one little medical student who was going into OB-GYN and knew a little bit about estrogen. That's it. Okay. Diabetes. They don't know that fat causes diabetes. Okay. You'll see doctors on the internet. They don't know that, most of them. All right. The only ones who know it are the ones who study these nutrition type lectures. So what I'm trying to tell you is conventional healthcare for treatment of the chronic diseases is a joke. The reason they call them chronic is because they can't cure them at all. Zero. You can't cure a dietary disease with a pill. The understanding of cancer is totally backward. They try to promote the somatic mutation theory, which has already been disproven, and they ignore the Warburg metabolic theory. Because there's no money in it. Dementia, we talked about that before. The dilatory theory, my theory, the neurovascular uncoupling, really supply and demand theory, that's not known. Yamashima's theory, calpain-cathepsin theory, lipid peroxidation and whatnot, that's not known. None of the doctors know this. I teach the other doctors. By the way, I will teach the best experts in neurology. I'm friends with them. Okay, I talk to them and I teach them. They don't know any of this stuff. It's not in their books. I've read their book. I have the Ivy League neurology textbook, 1,700 pages. They're a joke. I can guarantee you there's almost very little useful information in those books. Spine, I have the theory of ischemic spine as well as its relationship to fluoride and glyphosate. The journals refuse to publish my articles on that. I wrote a book about it because they won't publish it. Anything that doesn't make money gets ignored in medicine, okay? And disease causation. If you open up the conventional textbooks, every chronic disease, well, it's caused by, it's definitely associated with aging, seems to be sometimes related to genetics. Perhaps it's an infection. Perhaps it's due to, the big R word and socioeconomic disparity. BS. Most of these diseases are due to diet, sedentary lifestyle, excessive stress, lack of sleep, caffeine play a role because they all suppress the immune system. And then people sort of wandering and not having a purpose in their life. That makes them weak. Or they're abusing drugs, alcohol, tobacco. MJ is a terrible drug. It causes brain damage, can be laced with PCP, cause catatonic breakdowns. I've seen terrible outcomes with it. So there's a lot of idiots that actually think that's a healthy thing. Okay, so what is this? Oh, well, I'm not going to get into protein deficiencies, but often describing things is that, so dietary cause of disease, that's a horse. Because the old saying in medicine is when you hear hoofbeats, think of a horse, all right? But instead, you get all your attention focused on this nonsense. Zebras, quite rare. Okapis, super, super rare. Unicorns don't even exist. So you can't cure a disease if you have a unicorn version of causation, somatic mutation theory, some of these other things. Okay, we kind of went through these problems with the Ivy League's books, but like I said, when you don't have a religious foundation that says the least of mankind, that which you do to the least of my brethren, you do unto me, okay, you'll poison children. I think the average person in this audience, if you asked them, I'll give you $100 if you poison a child, you would say, no, I would not do that. 1,000, I would not do that. Whereas doctors do it all day long, for $10, okay? That's what happens when you have an atheistic medical system. And, they'll do that to anybody. You just tell them this is the standard of care. They follow the standard of care. They can't be sued. It doesn't matter what happens to the patient. They can't be sued. Most of them will follow it. And that's an evil system. Okay, 2023, over 10,000 research papers were retracted. That's an extraordinarily high number. Over 10,000 research papers were retracted. You go back in time 20 years ago, they would maybe retract like about 100 papers, okay? This is a major orders and orders of magnitude of false papers being published in the journals and then later on retroactively being retracted. That's a disaster. What that means is that the scientific literature is not reliable. You can't trust it. So just like Dr. McDougall said in the video earlier here tonight, you can't trust it. And my attitude about reading a medical journal, it's like, imagine you go to the grocery store and you look at the mutual funds, the magazines about mutual funds. Do you really think that's useful information? No, those are advertisements, okay? So most of what you see, because industry's funding most of the research and they own the journals, most of the journals, it's just advertising. It's not real information. And this is just some stuff about research. They found that when some people have tried to redo psychology experiments, for example, that are published in the most prestigious psychology journals, over 65%, they can't repeat the study, meaning that the data is bogus. Okay, here's another thing about research study in pharmacology research, drug research. And they found that when they try to repeat it, over 75% of it is not true. And that's in the most prestigious journals. It's not true, okay? And I can tell you, like, I'll read some of the journals about the spine or about the brain, and there'll be all this nonsense baby talk, but there'll be almost nothing useful, okay? And if you try to publish something useful, it will either be evaluated, does it make money or not for the journal authors or for the journal advertisers. And if it doesn't, it won't get included. Okay, let's see. These are just some good thinking quotes. I like this one by Ayn Rand. If contradictions don't exist, if you think there's a contradiction, recheck your premises. That will help you to think a lot. So if you think there's a contradiction in the literature, there's some BS going on. All right. Yeah, it's good to look at the old papers. Another thing I talk about now, because you got atheistic Darwinism as the system and big money, and they want population reduction, it's causing all kinds of weird things to happen. There's a program now that's called MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying. And they start this program and they say, oh, we're just going to euthanize some old people who really don't have much to live for or that are sick. And now they're saying, well, we think it actually applies to minors. And so they want to create a new category of mature minors so they can get consent from the kid without even getting consent from the parents to euthanize the kid, to have the kid commit suicide. This is insane, okay? They're pushing bills now to try to get infanticide expanded, okay? This is the kind of stuff you get. You have a system, a healthcare system that they want to use to reduce the population numbers. This is insane. It's completely insane, okay? And then, you go to a public school in America nowadays, they'll try to trick the kid into saying that, he wanted the boy to say, well, maybe I would like to be a girl, or vice versa for a girl, and they can give him puberty blockers. They're trying to do it so they can not even have to tell the parents, and they're sterilizing these kids, and they do these mutilating surgeries. It's insane. That's not in the best interest of a child. Children are young. They do all kinds of stupid things. They need their parents. The parents love them more than anyone else. You need that love of the parents. Even if the parents are two stupid idiots, because they love that child, they will work as hard as they can and usually do the right thing for the child. The parents, of course, are the ones. They're trying to take away control of the children from the parents. That's what you get. Once you say that humans are not created in the image of God and you move to atheistic Darwinism, basically whoever the ruler is in the local area, that ruler owns them like farm animals. And, when a cow has a baby calf, the cow is the mother of that calf. But as far as the farmer is concerned, no. The calf is his property and he wants to sell it for veal. And the same thing is kind of happening. Look at this. The big, great Harvard, 37 research cancer studies. They're all bogus, okay? This is the kind of stuff that comes out of these places because they're just trying to promote drugs, so they got to make the drug look good. Okay, and then nonconformity is scolded. This guy, he's not showing his butt crack, so he's not obeying. And that's pretty much how it is. If you show your butt crack, act like a dummy, you'll be praised and rewarded. If you actually try to be intelligent and do things differently, you can find yourself in trouble. And people will say, well, why is that? And I just told you, because if you cure a patient, you lose a customer. Big business doesn't want it. It doesn't want any innovation, doesn't want any change, because it's making money off the system exactly the way it is. And that's why innovation is totally discouraged in medicine. That's been one of my frustrations. I used to wrestle in college, and we all wanted to be good. We wanted to win. Some guy comes along, he's got a new technique. We study him. What can we learn from this guy? Because if you don't win, you get your butt kicked, okay? But in medicine, if you change anything, you're going to potentially take away from the profits of big money controlling the system. So they don't want change. They don't want innovation. It is strongly frowned upon. I can assure you of that. Okay, and then always the other joke. Oh, yeah, we'll save the whole world. We're going to, purify the sky. Just give us more money. Give us more money. And you're like, well, excuse me. How come the street's not clean? If you can't clean the street, how are you going to clean everything else? Okay. All right. And the other thing, too, there's this control dynamic of wanting everything to be controlled. Why can't the farmer save his seeds from last year and grow his own crops? Oh, no. It has to be this special stuff. Okay, that's BS. It's been shown organic farms produce just as much yield as conventional farms, all right? So why not have more of those? Why not have more small family farms? Oh, no. That's not good for control. And our ideas are so good that if you don't accept them, we're going to make them mandatory. And they're going to be enforced by this. And that's been well known for a long time. The truth can justify itself. Lies and BS are justified in this way. That is not good for society. And again, it comes down. Either you're created in the image of God, therefore part divine as well as part beast, therefore entitled to intrinsic rights, privacy, property, free speech, or you're not. Okay, and once you go away from this, you're just a farm animal. People are just farm animals, whether you like it or not. And if I showed that Hollingsworth gap thing at the beginning because I'm making the point, if you think this is weird, you have not studied history. Everything I'm saying here today is understated, just for your sake of your help. Okay, and then who are our so-called rulers guiding us? Are they just a bunch of puppets, okay? According to atheistic Darwinism, there is no such thing as mankind. Humans do not have a soul. There is no difference from us to other primates like chimpanzees except the fact we can talk. Now, do you really believe that's true? I don't think so. And I don't believe that nonsense. I majored in evolutionary biology at Stanford, was an A+ student in the subject, that they're only 1 per 5.5% of their DNA different. No, they're much more different than that, okay? Two twins, twin girls, two twin boys, two twin anybodies, they're about 5% different from each other. Chimpanzees are dramatically different from us, okay? Why are the Amish so healthy and then all the people taking all these drugs, all the kids on amphetamines for attention deficit? How come they're not healthy? Okay. And here's what I'm trying to say is the moment you realize that science that you trusted was actually eugenics, then you kind of wake up. Okay. It's eugenics. Come on. That's what's going on right now. Here's just some typical stories. This lady did some research where she showed that screening for aortic aneurysms was a waste of time. She got yelled at in the meeting. She got all these anonymous hate mails, all these threats. They called her institution, tried to get her fired. They tried to get her blacklisted from the profession so she could never do research again. Here's this guy. He's a black guy. He's the guy who figured out that atrazine was turning the male frogs into female frogs. And they tried to fire him, take away all his funding. This is the stuff with the GMO corn. And he actually, kept to his position and kept publishing papers on that. But what I'm trying to say is that's what happens to you. If you do something good, you get in trouble in medicine and in health research and nutrition research. I have a friend who's a molecular biologist. He had another friend who wrote a paper on high fructose corn syrup showing that it was routinely contaminated by mercury. They fired him, took away all his funding, and they tried to get him in more trouble. And so what I'm saying is that's what happens. That happens routinely. Oh, here's where I had the Hollingsworth gap. So the Hollingsworth gap, she was a psychologist who studied children with high IQs. And she said if one person had an IQ 30 points higher in a given domain, the person with less knowledge in that domain would often see them as being kind of weird or autistic and awkward. And so what I'm trying to say is a lot of times if you feel somebody's saying something you're weird and autistic in a field that you haven't studied, maybe you need to study that field some more, because everything I'm telling you is old news. I'm just trying to, get more people up to speed, to help you. Because look, according to big money, 95% of us are going to be gone by 2030. And hopefully the ones that know a little more will have a better chance of surviving. All right. And here's a good quote by Thomas Carlyle. There's always a good reason, then there's a real reason. So you're always told some type of nonsense why something's being done. And then the real reason is usually somebody benefits from it financially, or it helps big money achieve its goals. And big money has so much money, it can just pay people to do all kinds of bad things. So unfortunately, a lot of people in power are paid off by big money, and they're doing something for the wrong reasons. Rather than helping the public, they're doing it to rip them off, etc. Okay. Let's see, what is science? So like I said, a science ideally is objective, formation of a hypothesis, performance of experiments, and then looking for results, trying to repeat the experiment, see if it's reproducible. That's like real objective science, and that was invented by the Catholic Church. If you study it, you will see that is true. Okay, what is modern science? Modern science is, atheistic science, and this is why I said it's a joke, is modern science is whatever big money says it is. That's the truth. Big money says this is science, and then they pay scientists to agree with them, and scientists have to agree with them because they're poor, they don't have any money. And then they say that this is our expert, this is what they say, and if you don't agree with it, you get in trouble, okay? So it's basically a fist in your face. That is what science is. That's ridiculous, but that has become accepted, okay? Look at it, I just told you. The child psychiatry, they just poison children, and that's what they're paid to do. Okay, and there's lots of other fields in medicine. I kind of went through them. They're all the conventional internal medicine fields on the common chronic diseases are wrong, and they prescribe drugs that everybody knows don't work, and the patients typically just get worse and worse and sicker. You can't cure these dietary diseases, toxicology diseases with a pill. Okay, so what I'm saying is this is bullying. This is intimidation. This is not real science. Okay, and then what is misinformation? Misinformation is anything big money doesn't want you to say or do. Okay? Like here's a typical stupidity. Professor gets fired for saying that sex is determined by XY chromosomes. That's insane. Everybody knows, let's say a farm animal is born. When a baby farm animal is born, the farmer looks at the crotch, and if it's got a Bozak, it's a boy. If it's got a Virginia, it's a female. A Johnson or a Bozak, same thing. If it's got a Virginia, it's a female. He doesn't ask the animal, what would you prefer to be? It's nonsense. Okay? And here's, by the way, one of these books about the story of the formation of science by Rodney Stark, How the West Won, the neglected story of the triumph of modernity, okay? You look at like the greatest scientific genius of all time, Isaac Newton. He spent more time reading the Bible than he did doing science, all right? You look at where science started coming from. Here is Charlemagne, around 800 AD being crowned, and who was his head guy? Alcuin, to form the school system, okay? And the basic education. Here's Thomas Aquinas. And he basically unified Aristotelianism and Christianity and showed that faith and reason go together. And this led the pathway. He was also, mentored by Albert the Great, Albertus Magnus. And basically, this opened up education in a great way that led to the Renaissance, okay? And here's Abelard and Eloise, okay? He was a great Aristotelian philosopher, genius of Europe, got himself into trouble. That's a long story in his romance with the younger Eloise. The student. Okay, anyways, here is Copernicus, figured it out. He's a Catholic priest, figured out that the earth was not in the center of the universe, but the sun was. And then later on, they were trying to figure out how to make it all work, and they had this concept of epicycles that didn't seem to make a lot of sense. Kepler came along and figured out a way to explain things with elliptical orbits, that you didn't need the epicycles, okay? And just take a look at like the attitude of Kepler. For many years, I wanted to be a theologian, but now I see how God is also praised by my work in astronomy. Science is the process of thinking God's thoughts after him. The laws of nature are within the grasp of the human mind. God wanted us to recognize them. He created us after his own image so that we could share in his thoughts. I am merely thinking God's thoughts after him. The chief aim of studying the external world is to discover the rational order and the harmony imposed on it by God, which he reveals to us in the language of mathematics. This wisdom of the Lord is infinite. The heavens declare the glory of God. It does not matter if my book finds its reader in 100 or even 1,000 years. Has not God himself waited 6,000 years for a human mind to be capable of gazing on his celestial spheres with understanding? Johannes Kepler, okay? So that's basically, Isaac Newton could have wrote that, okay? That's typical of how they thought. And it created the idea that the universe was rational and that it could be understood, and that we are created in the image of God, thus like God, and thus can think rationally and understand parts of his universe to the best of our ability. Okay. So Isaac Newton says a bunch of the same things. Okay. He who thinks half-heartedly will not believe in God, but he who really thinks has to believe in God. All of this stuff pushes towards logical thinking and believing that the universe can be understood. And that's why science came out of the Catholic Church. It just did. And then Christianity in general. All right. So basically, when talking about nutrition, you need that for health. I joke a little bit about, Sir Galahad had to be of good behavior to be worthy to find the Holy Grail. Lancelot couldn't because he was bonking Guinevere, and that was immoral. So what I mean by that, the idea, you have to pay a little bit of a price. You have to make an effort as an individual to learn a little bit of basics about health and diet. You can't just take a pill. Any demented person can be given a pill every day. That's veterinarian medicine. But to actually have to study a little bit on your own and learn something, I can assure you, though, the difference in health between understanding nutrition and being able to help people is like the difference between a Gulliver or a Lilliputian. And I would describe the conventional medical system as a bunch of Lilliputians that keep down the nutrition and health coach world and nutrition learning doctors, because the insurance companies won't pay you 10 cents to teach a patient, but it's the most healthy thing you could do. I could talk about soy. Soy is kind of a joke. I already briefly alluded to it. Oh, here I was talking about using logic to answer medical questions. Like, here's an example of deductive logic. Deductive logic has complete information, provides truth. You just have all the information there. You just put it together. So the classic syllogism is Aristotle talking about Socrates. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. And you can say it this way. Excessive stress is bad because it raises cortisol and catecholamines. Well, caffeine raises cortisol and catecholamines. Therefore, caffeine is bad. That's pretty simple. But if you go on the internet, you'll see all these so-called health experts telling you caffeine is good and coffee is good. Even the sleep experts will say coffee is good. And why do they do that? Why do they lie? Because they know better. These guys are not dummies. They know they have to lie or they won't get invited to interview anywhere. You don't become popular on the internet by telling the truth about stuff that loses money for big corporations. Okay, and what I would say about healthcare in the last 100 years is it has gotten better in technology, things that are based on electronics and based on the computer. But in terms of like helping the typical patient's fat, sick, and stupid because they eat a bad diet, not for anything else. And unless you include nutrition and toxicology, you can never help those patients. And the vast majority of patients that come through hospitals, they never get better. They just progressively deteriorate. Okay, and the way a hospital works, the way all hospital works, healthcare in all the Western world, you got a bunch of people that are paid the lowest possible salaries, and they love the patients. They do the best they can for them. They're very nice. Typically, their own family have got a bunch of patients. And then you got what I call thin-intelligence silos. These are people that have graduate degrees, and they like the patients. They want to help the patients, but they have a very narrow set of knowledge, and they typically are only paid. The billing codes are designed that they must follow the standard of care, which, say for an MD, for an internal medicine doctor, almost always it means prescribe a drug or recommend a test, a diagnostic test, a CAT scan, an MRI, a blood test, a colonoscopy, something like that, or they don't get paid. So they will go by whatever they're told to do. Most of them, the vast majority, are very conformist, and they kind of have to be. Okay, some guy's got $300,000 of student loans he has to pay off. He doesn't want any trouble. He's going to obey the standard of care, prescribe his drugs, get paid for the day, pay off his debt. All right, he's not going to mess around and experiment. The reason I'm interested in all this stuff, I'm an old guy. I'm bored, okay? My kids are growing up. I got nothing to do, and I'm not allowed to use my brain in conventional medicine, so I'm using it for this. This is the most capacity to help people. Okay, the hospital owners usually are much more money-minded. They don't care that much about individual health. They always have bean counters that track the productivity of every single doctor. How many billing codes are we getting out of this person? Okay, and the doctor has to go by that, and they have to get the money or they lose their jobs. Okay, and then on top of that, the whole big system, where's the really big money coming from? Let's say big pharma, okay? And anybody who wants grant money for research, they're going to have to kiss big pharma's butt, and big pharma's going to say, help us sell our drug. And if you don't help us sell our drug, like I said, you won't get any grant money, and if you criticize our drug, we'll get you fired. So that's why the system can never improve and it can never fix itself, and the only thing that can make it better is a God-based worldview where you say, we are going to do what's right regardless of the money. Okay, that's why parents are the best person for a kid. They're going to do what's right. They don't care about money. And what I'm saying is, look at open heart. Look at coronary artery disease. If you go for open heart surgery, you bill for $150,000. If you do a stent, you bill for $30,000 each stent. But if you treat them with a plant-based vegan diet, you get 100% cure rate, and you don't get paid at all. Maybe $1,000. Okay, you treat them with the other things I just talked about, coronary artery disease and stents, you get a zero increase in longevity other than the acute MI patient, acute myocardial infarction patient. So the treatment that doesn't work pays tons of money. The treatment that does work pays zero to pocket change. So that's why it can't fix itself, because the money comes from ripping off the ignorant patient, okay? And if you were making $1 billion a year, would you want the system to change? No, big money's making billions of dollars. They don't want it to change at all. And we already know what works. You got these telehealth things like the McDougall program, some of these other places. You had the Kempner Rice houses. We know what works. It's not rocket science. You can take these abandoned universities. They're going bankrupt. There's more college educations going online. You can convert those into health centers like old Kempner places where people come for a weekend, a week, a month, whatever. So we actually know exactly what to do, but there's just no money in it. So anyways, that's what I got.
Peter, terrific talk as ever. Some great points you've made there. Here's a quick summary. As I was watching you, the doctors don't know what affects health is basically what your opening statement were. You can't fix dietary disease with a pill. Doctors are prevented from being educated. It's the bean counter mentality to generate billing codes. Doctors are under pressure to go fast. CME, continuing education, is a joke. It's a trip to the beach to take your wife. It's not education. It's sponsored by drug companies. The movement to get away from traditional values, you're saying that is to take control of the population, basically an enslavement in the absence of religion, which teaches respect for mankind. So what else did you have? Science is corruption for a reason, because scientists need money, and science is a replacement for God. They're playing games with words. They're using cancel culture and call you names if you go against major corporate interests. Solzhenitsyn said that atheism makes possible authoritarianism, that these are people who have forgotten God that get into these systems. The greatest danger is to lose sense of all danger. To destroy a people, you have to first sever their roots, their culture, and you use an ideology of, we're virtuous, we're doing good, and evil is banal. It's done by gullible people, normal people, like the good Germans. I think of back in, how did Nazism rise? Because of the good Germans. So this is what has happened to science, you're saying. Stalin said religion is opposed to science. We must worship science, not God. And science is whatever we say it is. So McDougall found and taught the truth, and it didn't cost $1 billion. It's lifestyle, not genes, Adam and Eve plus indoor plumbing, a garden full of plants. You talked about the Spartan vegan diet, which is similar to the McDougall diet, and preferring methylcobalamin instead of the other type of B12. You said you can't have good science without a religious society, and that researchers today are lapdogs. Examples you give: ADHD, they're giving speed to kids that drug dealers would get arrested for giving to adults. Listening to Prozac, the book, it's very toxic to humans. They're talking about using it as chemotherapy. I hadn't heard that. Psychology, you said, has become a joke. Psychologists don't know the difference between a man and a woman. How are they going to help other people? Harvard pushes the clown diet. Walter Willett pushes nonsense, healthy oils and healthy fats, a diet that's basically terrible for your arteries, and he's pushing alcohol as a health food. You talked about the truth zones and the level of truth. First was the grandma truth that's kind of universally accepted. Then there was the pre-med truth. Then the third level is shadow ban truth, criticizing products, coffees, pharmaceuticals. Then you'll be suppressed. And the fourth and final level is truth beyond YouTube, things you can't say in this place we are right now. Subsidized food, you said, is often full of toxins, slow poisons. GMO corn, very toxic. GMO soy is the same. And is it sterilizing people? Avocados and apples are sprayed with this new peel stuff they put on, the slow poison. You talked about the threshold effect in lowering sodium, needing to lower it enough to get the effect. The truth is kept hidden from doctors in training. The truth won't usually get published because anything that doesn't make money gets ignored in medicine. Basically, doctors can be told, I'll give you $1,000 if you poison a child, and doctors will do that. It's normal. It's the standard of care, meaning they can't get sued. In 2023, over 10,000 research papers were retracted. This is orders of magnitude of false papers being published beyond what was being published 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. Scientific journals and the scientific literature cannot really be trusted. It's advertising, not real information. You can't repeat 65% of the studies published. If it's drug research, over 75% of it can't be repeated and is therefore not true. If you think there are contradictions in literature, it's because there's BS going on. You talked about MAID, medical assistance in dying, where they're making it so a mature minor can give his own permission or consent to be killed, basically allowed to commit suicide. They're pushing bills to push infanticide to allow this to happen, decreasing population. Schools can give puberty blockers without parental knowledge or consent in some states. They're trying to take away control and give parental control to the state. Harvard researcher, you showed 37 studies were bogus. And if you do things differently, you'll cause trouble. If you cure a patient, you're losing a customer. It's a controlled dynamic. They want everything controlled by the government from on top. And our ideas are so good, they say, that if you don't accept them, then we'll make them mandatory. So the truth justifies itself. You don't have to make things mandatory. But bluffing and BS, you do have to make mandatory. You talked about the Amish being healthy because they avoid a lot of what the rest of society is doing and drugs that the rest of society are taking. If you do something good for the public in medicine, you can get in trouble. There's always a good reason, and then there's the real reason. Big money can pay people to do a lot of bad things. You said modern science is whatever big money says it is. Everyone gets paid to agree. And if you don't agree, you're going to get in trouble. Science is a fist in your face. I thought that was a great quote. Professor was fired for saying that the sex is determined by X and Y chromosomes. You went through the healthcare pyramid, which had technologists at the bottom, people that actually love the patients. The intelligence silos was the next narrow expertise. These people have to follow what they're told to do to get paid so they can pay off their debts. Then you have the hospital owners above that, money-minded, bean counters. Productivity is the focus, and the focus is on money. And at the very top of the pyramid is big pharma. You're not going to get grant money unless you kiss their ass. Don't criticize our drugs. So it's not like families where, you're only going to do what's right regardless of the money. Big medicine makes billions a year. There's no motivation to change. We know what works, but since it doesn't make money, doctors aren't interested. Peter, this was a great presentation. I really, as always, enjoy your talk. It's a superb job, very educational. We're going to see you again when you have more to share with us. To everybody that's watching today, we're going to see you again too. Please give the video a like, share it, subscribe to the channel. We're going to catch you on the next one. Thank you.